With summer approaching, that means lots of plentiful sunshine. And not only do humans enjoy sitting out in the sun, but our tea enjoys it as well. So today we're going to learn how to use the energy of the sun to make sun tea on today's episode of Let's Talk Tea. Hello, tea lovers! Welcome to Rebecca's Tea Cozy, where we share a love of tea and other things that are cozy to nourish our bodies and our souls. In this series of Let's Talk Tea, we've been focusing on how to make iced teas. We've discussed several methods to make this popular beverage, especially when the sun is coming out and the days are getting hot. We learned the most typical method of making iced tea, which is to hot brew the tea just as you would a cup of tea, and then cool it off in either the fridge or with some ice to enjoy. Last week we talked about another method, which was the cold brew method, where you add tea to water, stick it in the fridge for about 8 to 10 hours or even up to 24, and then strain and enjoy. Now with the cold brew method, we said that it's a little more effective for teas that are brewed or steeped at a lighter temperature, such as your greens or whites. But teas that are steeped at higher temperatures aren't necessarily as effective in the cold brew method. That's where our third method comes in. And this method can be used for all teas as well, but it does work effectively for black teas, which is one of the more traditional iced tea types. So today we're going to talk about sun tea, which, as its name implies, uses the energy of the sun instead of the energy of a stove or the energy of your fridge in order to brew your iced tea. It's super simple, just like the cold brew method, and it can be a lot of fun. So let's begin by talking about what we need and how to get our tea ready to steep. So just as in the cold brew method, all you need is tea, a brewing vessel, and water. Now just one note of caution is sun tea used to be really popular and has a nostalgic feel to it. In fact, as a little girl, I remember my grandmother putting a jar with some tea bags out on the back porch and let it sit in the sun and make her sun tea. But it's not as popular as it used to be, possibly just because it's gone out of style, but also there has been concerns about possible bacteria that can grow in the tea because of steeping. So let me give you some cautions so that you feel much better if you've heard that for how to make sure that your sun tea is safe to drink. So one, begin with quality tea and make sure that it's been stored properly. Step two, start with a clean jar. Now one trick may be to put a little bit of vinegar in the jar, swirl it around, and then rinse it out. And that way it adds just a little bit of additional sterilization to the jar in a way that's absolutely non-toxic. And then step three is to have clean water. Mine is filtered. I have an AquaPure water filter. You might have a filter on your house system, or perhaps you use water, bottled water that's been filtered. So whatever method, just make sure that you have filtered or clean drinking water, which is important whether you're making tea or whether you're just putting it inside your body. So once you have these ingredients, it's going to be pretty much the same process that we've been using to make hot brewed tea or cold brewed tea. So we start with tea, and I'm going to use a black tea. This is a Nilgiri, which is a black tea from India. And we are going to put about 1 teaspoon of loose leaf tea per cup, or if you're using tea bags, 1 tea bag per 8-ounce cup of water. Now, if you make a much larger jar, such as a gallon jar, you can lessen some of that tea. You won't need as much of tea, but for the amount that I'm making, we're going to make sure that it has definitely enough flavor. So this is my teaspoon, which is in the shape of a teacup, but it actually is equivalent to a tablespoon. 1 tablespoon equals 3 teaspoons. A quart is, of course, 4 cups, so I need 1 more teaspoon. So I'm going to eyeball it. Does not have to be precise at all. So I put my tea in the jar. I fill it with water. I put a lid on and I set it in a sunny spot outside to steep. Now, a tip on selecting your sunny spot: one, you want to make sure that you can keep an eye on it, whether it's through a window or if you're sitting on the back porch or on a patio. That way you can see when it has steeped because it'll be the color that you're desiring. And you also want to put it on top of a surface that will also heat up with sun. So rather than maybe setting it in the grass, you could put it on a brick patio or on a hot wood railing, something that would also be soaking up the sun. That'll just help add the heat to it. Not necessary. You can put it in the grass if you'd like, but just a little tip. It also maybe keeps it from a few additional critters that might be crawling around in the grass, but your lid will be on tightly, so it will keep little critters out of your tea. You also want to decide ahead how long you're going to steep it for. Now, sun tea can steep anywhere from maybe 1 hour if it's in a really hot sunny spot and it's an intense temperature day, up to maybe about 5 hours if it's not quite as warm and it's not as intense heat outside. And once it hits that color, as I shared, then you'll take it out and resume the next phase of tea making. You do not want to add any sweetener, or I wouldn't recommend adding any fruits or anything at this point. Just put your tea in and let it steep, and then you would put those additions in after it's finished steeping. So this morning I set a quart jar out to sit in the sun so it would be ready to share with you. So I'm going to put this one out in the sun to begin steeping and grab the one that's been outside so we can move to the next step. I'll be right back. So this is the jar of Assam black tea, which is another black tea from India. It is just a basic black tea. It is a little bit more of the intense teas. We learned that this is the one that creates that strong, robust flavor in an English breakfast or an Irish or Scottish breakfast blend. And this sat out from about 8:30 till 12:30 today. And our temperature here was probably about 75 to 85 degrees by that point in the full sun. And so you can see how beautifully rich and dark that tea is. It's still warm to the touch. And this is now going to be strained out so we can take the tea leaves out, stop it from steeping, and we can enjoy right away, or we can put it in the fridge to cool off and possibly add some extra goodies. So I brought along a few additions that you could put in your tea, and we're going to focus on an episode next week where we talk about a few more ways to enhance our iced teas and take them up a notch. But today I just brought a few simple things. I love summertime when it's filled with fruits and colors and herbs and all kinds of great things. So I have basil, lemon, lime, orange, strawberry, and mint. This particular variety of mint is chocolate mint, which is a really nice mint flavor. It goes great with desserts. I love putting it with strawberries and whipped cream and a little mint on top. Delicious. Add some dark chocolate over the top. So we're going to use a few of these additions to make some of our iced teas that we'll enjoy right away. And then we can also put some aside. Now, when you're making your iced tea as well, after you have strained it, that would also be the time if you want to add sweetener, especially if you're consuming it right away. Last week, we talked about how if you add sweetener and put it in the fridge, it's not going to store or last as long as if you don't put any sweetener in it. It might go bad or get cloudy a few days ahead of when just plain iced tea is. So if you're not going to be drinking your iced tea within a few days, then it might be something to consider of putting it away with no sweetener and then adding that sweetener as you consume each glass. So for our first glass, which we'll put in a little bit of a fancy one with a sprig of lemon, we're going to strain out the tea and then make an addition with this one. So I'm just going to use a strainer, and I can use any strainer that I want. This is a nice one because it sits right on top of any glass, regardless of the size. And then for this iced tea, I think it would be really nice to put some basil and some strawberry. Isn't that a great combination? Strawberry and basil. And not only does it taste good, but it also looks beautiful in the glass. You can also put them in mason jars. These are great for drinking glasses. They're really thick, so they don't break easily. You can put lids on them, and again, it's just the smaller size lid, but it fits the small containers, these, and a variety of other jars, quart jars that have the same size. So this is another size or shape that you can purchase in the ball jars. I love, if I'm not finished with my beverage, putting a lid on, popping it in the fridge, can go back to it later. So very handy. And with this one, I have orange, and I think I'm going to put orange and mint together. Because again, that's another great combination when I think about those two flavors together. Pour my tea in. And that also makes a beautiful glass with the green and the fruit. Citrus fruits, of course, are great to add, especially to offset the intensity of the black tea, to have that little bit of sour note to it. It definitely can stand up against it. Next, we're going to put the remaining tea in a jar that we can store to enjoy later. So this is just a wide mouth pint-sized jar. Something you may want to consider doing is squishing the tea leaves down and getting any extra flavor out of them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time right now doing that, but just know that you can get the rest of these out. The other thing is, if it is a little dark and can stand to be watered down just a little bit, go ahead and rinse the jar out that has the tea leaves in it, and then continue to pour, because the water that goes in that you're using to rinse the jar will actually pick up a little bit of flavor in it too and can be added to your tea. So you kill two birds with one stone. Now for this one, I can cover it with the lid and put it in the fridge and then add any additions to it as I drink the tea. Or I can go ahead and put a few things in it right now, put it in the fridge so it'll begin extracting the flavors of those fruits or herbs that I put in. So I'm thinking that another interesting combination would be some lime and basil. Maybe even a hint of lemon as well. So like a citrus basil drink. So I'm going to put the lid on tight and then put this in the fridge. Now, just a reminder as well that it is recommended to always store things in glass and to make your sun tea with glass containers, because we don't want any plastic leaching in, especially when it's a warm or hot container. The other thing is that if you put this in the fridge, because it does have additions in here, it might not keep as long, so you want to make sure that you consume it within a day or two. So these are some fun ways to share iced tea, a favorite beverage around our country and around the world, with some friends. You can spruce it up or keep it plain Jane. So again, next week on our episode of Let's Talk Tea, we'll be looking at additional ways to jazz up our iced tea beverages and make them a little more exotic. I hope you can join me. Until then, be blessed with a cup of tea.